And now, Song of Sandingomm, written and narrated by Timothy Vavra. Harvest leaves rustle through the blustery winds of autumn. That's the green of the season, the transformation of elm, laurel, aspen, beech, maple, and gables of many trees echoed the metamorphosis of myriad seasons. Golden, orange, damson, and crimson leaves intermingled in fallen tufts as the spirits of another age carried them throughout the forest of Mossflower. The river Moss carried a vast assortment of treasures down its storied currents. It carried mischief and trouble just the same. A ranky, janky raft cobbled together hastily was on a merry jaunt down towards misadventure. Two squirrels manned a piteous skiff as it jostled and cavorted down towards an unknown destination. Before the feast, greetings among good friends and families reuniting. Sometimes the first time in many seasons, abounded throughout the Abbey Hall. For the first time in some time, Gingeria and Sandingomm came to the Abbey to celebrate, bringing their son Toothsome with him, the prime of his life. He was a young captress, dashing, but rugged for adventuring. Nothing it approached the family gregariously and eager to catch up and greet them fondly. No, hold Sandingham around her hip and squeeze her tightly in a warm embrace, singing, "The G in both our names stands for Wren. If you don't understand that, you're a dim-witted hen." Nuff sang warmly to anyone present for them to be hearing. Holding a bag full of caramel nips for the Dibbins, he continued his singing jovially. "I've got a little bag full of nips. I've got some nips for you. I've got a whole big bag full of nips. You can have, you can have, you can have, you can have, you can have one or two." After the excitement of snacking died down, proper introductions were to be made with Martin Nuff and Nuffet, and the lady folk became acquainted with the mysterious young Toothsome and their parents they knew so well. It seemed Toothless was restless down on the farm and yearned for wandering and adventuring. Their parents were glad to have Nuff agree to take him on their next big adventure. As Martin recently begun preparations to fully ensconce himself at the Abbey as its defender, the brother mouse among the few so chosen. Great heaps of food abounded in Redwall Abbey. The cellar holds of the Abbey, Ferdy and Cogs, had been glad not only to have grown to be master craftsmen responsible for the grandest work of the newly established Abbey, but to be masterful in provisioning of harvests and hold-asides for feasts of this kind. For those who saw the food set before them were taken aback at the scale of the rations before them. Flowing over abundant were grapes, apples, fruits, fresh candied, baked and dried of all kinds. Deeper than ever turnip, tater, beetroot pie, baked high, baked to a golden brown. Hot root soup with river shrimp, and candied chestnuts peppered throughout the fair. For the joy of picking all around. Kind and gentle beasts from all over Mossflower had congregated here to share in the splendour of nature's bounty and the kindness of the Abbey's generosity. Abbess Germain presided over the festivities, along with Billy of Brockhall. They proclaimed grace with reverence, but briefly and eagerly. Great goblets filled to the brim with dandelion and burdock cordial, tankards filled with nut brown beer. Buttercup and honey cordial was brought before the Dibbins and the young at heart. The mould feast of Mossflower had begun. Spittle and Spook had escaped from dire straits several times. Once escaping from a dreadful life as horse slaves on the Bloodwake seasons ago. Once things fell into a band of weasels, so adopted as a mater to a certain degree. Though through it all hard graft and striving, they stayed loyal to each other and got through it only just. They were a duo without ethics per se, but they had been kind to each other even begrudgingly during periods of turmoil, where the bickering of weasels had become second nature to them now. The two squirrels stumbled clumsily into the door jambs of the gatehouse, Martin's abode at Redwall Abbey. They clambered over his rug, micturating upon it, confiscating his full haversack, and lay upon his bed. chewing into the cheese and nut outfurls the victuals contained. Spittle keeps his feet upon the bedroll, dislodging Martin's sword. Secret is there. For not to let a chance for such grand thievery go unutilized, the squirrels sauntering away with their apples, walnuts, cheese, and their chance at greatness before them, and a black leather scabbard with the red pommel. They absconded down the river as they came, though on foot and hastily so, as their makeshift raft had come asunder. It seemed only a moment for the bowl feast, and yet Martin was stuffed beyond measure. He'd not allowed himself to take advantage of the bounteous harvest as much before now, and he was ready to rest and digest. Back to the gatehouse he was glad to go home. He'd found it ransacked, and at first appraisal it was clear that his sword had been nabbed. It took a great deal not to have his sword by his time at all times, and only days ago he'd felt safe stowed it away for the first time, having disciplined himself to set it aside for other wielders, other worldly warriors before him. He was coming to terms with his aging, becoming a brother mouse of the abbey after his adventuring days. Being at the abbey and safeguarding the woodland folk that depended on him for dependence were more than his cup of tea these days, and wandering was not his agenda. The force and might of his sword's invincible aura emanated through, and he was imbued with that same might. For the first time in some time, without a weapon, he felt just as safe as with the most fearsome blade he had ever known. Or he knew that a warrior's force not comes from his weapon, but from his will. And he did not fear the loss of his father's blade, or he had already consigned himself to passing it on. And the vermin that had must have done this were feckless indeed. He knew he could depend upon his friends to rescue his blade, and the destiny of its march through time, beyond seasons, to the right hands where it was intended, to fight for justice, and for brave champions that would find it, no matter its course. But clear as day where the Tweezle track led. They led slippery along the ridge and over the wings of the mounds of the Middle Moss, and so it was clear what needed to be done. Oh, dearly, I'm glad we lifted that woodship out of the waters once again, Nuff said. The Shrew clan had woodships floating nobly at dock and at England near the abbey called Woodship Creek. Boarding the ship, young Din, Nuff, Nufflet, and Twosome met the Shrew crew warmly, and Logolog was there, crewing the lot of them. Martin chose to stay behind to tend to the abbey and defend the Dibbons should any marauders come a-wandering, so he bid farewell to this journey, trusting his friends to retrieve something so dear to him, so that he might ensure that the good family of the abbey would be protected. Dearer still were they to him. He bade them farewell, and good fortune as the woodship set out in good pursuit of the trail down the river. You vile spittle snout, you wouldn't know from a pickles if it knocked you in the nostril, Booth said, as he squeaked in a strange imitation of weasel speech, grabbing a satchel from his brother squirrel as he gobbled a bit of Ribston people apple. You're as clumsy as a bumblebee after a bruising, Spitter crowed obstinately as he grabbed the bag back and gave his compatriot a bumping with the scabbarded sword for his trouble. You loathsome shirkaday, Spook cried as he rubbed his rear, where Spittle gave him an equally loathsome whoop. The two squirrels were so lost in bickering and chattering that Spook walked in a broad pole connecting the dock to the strangest contraption craft either had ever seen. They knew at once they had found their bargain. The cat's paw cut a merry and majestic path. It trudged jauntily down the river moss as the crew of the good woodship gazed appreciatively, in awe and in wonder of a strange new type of ship. It wasn't strange enough that there was a riverboat churning out its smokestack, ash and clouds billowing out, only intermittently. The ship was clad in ivory red, gold with ebony accents that was done in an exotic fashion. The name of the ship was self-evident, as the ship, the charmed, the symbol of all cat's fortune, the charmed cat's paw. The water wheel was designed to resemble each paddle of paw, cutting an ivory and peach swath through the river, as massive jelly-bean toes parted the water with fervent aplomb. The woodship crew surmised at once what the course of action must be, so obvious to the distance of the keen minds of the pedal ship, which plan which must be smooth and tidy. Knox began singing. Who wrought the wrongs of gambling vermin for this cat's paw, a den of beasts of ill repute, to trick, to avoid the trouble, or a quibble, or a quarrel, or we would eat, look, suck, and take sudden in a barrel. The catamaran was so suspended by ropes, pulleys, and cables above the cat's paw, always to function as a crow's nest, command bridge. From the catamaran, the leaders of the crew, the owners of the cat's paw, witnessed the woodship approaching. The two cats who owned the cat's paw were called Nathan and Robin Birdcage, and they meant business as much as they meant pleasure. They began talking with their most trusted bodyguard and right-hand mouse, Eunice Bamblethorn, the toughest mouse in area for counties around. Robin asked her for a threat analysis, and after an ocular appraisal, she noted the crew aboard were as docile and amiable as bow babes. As such, she foresaw no trouble letting them aboard to gamble and to enjoy the cat's paw's enjoyments. The woodland crew was getting ready to sortie onto the cat's paw as both vessels were approaching a nearby dock. They had already devised a cunning plan per Nuff's suggestion. Twosome had been lodged in a barrel full of fine rainbow flying fish near the core. They were keepers for him to dine upon, as for sustenance as he awaited the signal to emerge, for the right moment to occur. There was another step to good Nuff's plan, but plan B would put Twosome in the pantry of the kitchen, and the element of surprise and an inside man would be beneficial in any case. Though Nuff's plan A would leave the situation his master stroke in a heist, to retrieve Martin's sword from the vault of the cat's paw. Then he lent Nufflet with good cheer his brother dagger that bore the fighter lent for him. Oh, you expect you'll be returning this, young Sir Mouse? Oh, you best you expect my dagger and good out. My thing it goes to be telling me, oh, I should say with the woodship player, and leave the comfort that the snake of it to tear Nuffo. I said Mokind be finest in extraction teams regardless. Nuff and Nufflet were exiting the woodship, whose crews stayed behind in clandestine. Not that they would not pursue the cat's paw, but from a distance not visible from the other ship's catamaran for a day, to allow the plan to get underway and allow it ready for rescue. With Twosome bravely in a barrel of fish, the mouse thieves approached the dock where to enter the cat's paw. Thankfully, there was no red carpet for the fish barrel to gunk up. But aside from that, the entrance to the Cat's Paw Casino riverboat was as classy as they come. Discreet wood paneling and lighting subdued as if for a candlelit dinner, along with the gentle swaying of the larger ship, made the new passengers trepidatious regarding their surroundings. The crew were as friendly as they come. Comfortable they had the surroundings and the situation in hand, as North negotiated with them for the barrel of fish. You see, fishies are barrel of gold, you see. These fishes have a very specific provenance, destined for the King of Siam to dine upon. They got sidetracked to this here destination. Surely they will not last the trip, and we'll be glad to exchange them for you with your owners for some chips and accommodation here on the Cat's Paw for an evening or a few, as our fortunes find us. That ship's dealer of the House of the Cat's Paw had heard of such arrangements before, and as shortly ago an arrangement was made by two squirrels for such a treasure as they got by a nice compensation for, if a bargain for acquiring such a marvellous blade. Such surely the luck of the cat paw was in its might, if a barrel of royal flying fish had made its way here, as if upon serendipity. Robert and Nathan were glad to have rarefied treats to sup upon, in the worst case scenario, for a few nights' stay, and whatever fortune these two mouse thieves might be convinced to be parting with. They were also shrewd negotiators, and they knew that some might come, or already be on their ship, who might find these delicacies even more valuable. So they were glad to sit them in their cool pantry until could be found none on their ship would desire the flying fish more. Now bedecked with chips and an assortment of accommodation for as long as their fortunes were found favourable, they were let into the holes of the cat's paw. There every type of woodland beast could be found seeking their fortune. Weasels, foxes, rats, voles, stoats, otters, shrews, and other creatures could be found, though mice and squirrels were vanishingly few among them, and badgers were entirely absent. All kinds of playing of the games were on offer, which resembled the fare of distant principalities: roulette, blackjack, Baccarat, dice games, and other amusements such as the Wheel of Fortune were on display and in participatory use. And the dealers and attendants were bedecked in gold brocade vests. There was a shell game as well, where the chips were of little use to the mice, and now they played a few leisurely games of blackjack to peruse the crowd and wait for the right moment. They were keeping clear of the games they knew for their own guile to be rigged in favour of the house, which were most of them. Upon being spited, I not exactly spotted another mouse who resembled him hauntingly. This mouse held a familiar fascination in eyes, North's eyes especially, and he knew he had to introduce himself to get to the bottom of this strange familiarity he felt towards him. He walked right up and announced himself as he always did. "Oh no, the Prince of Mouse Thieves! Who might you be then?" "Hubert Guthrie, me name. Only the G in my surname is sound, don't you know?" It was obvious to all involved what the situation was, as strange as it must have seemed to the family. Unexpectedly, there was a reunion which few could anticipate. Gladly enough asked to know where Guthrie had been all these years, why never returning to Mossflower to shop home about his son he left in the company of the Stickles. Guthrie responded confidently, but not happily. "I was glad to save Ben and Goody Stickle way back when you were little, but my missus, you and Mum, wasn't so fortunate. It was too hard to come back after years of adventuring, but she reminded me of your lost mother, so I couldn't bear it. I never expected to see you here, but I suppose it's good fortune that brought us both to this place. If you'll be happy to have me as a friend, I will hold you as a brother, but I suppose I have lost the right for you to call me father. That right belongs to Ben Stickle, and I wouldn't deprive him of it. And Goody's been your mum, but I want you to know your mother Cullenpine, who I've not been able to think about all these years. Now, seeing her and your face, and the face of your young here, I find I will cease my travelling days if I can find a nearby abode, once all these troubles die down." "Actually," Nuff replied, "perhaps you can help us set our friends, and anyone helps my friends. A friend of mine, matey." Nuffrey was well informed on what they intended, as well as what they needed him to be, and he inquired for room service, as he's had some good bit of winnings. He was glad to see the expenses used to pull off a righteous great heist. And a grand bit of trickery was a perfect way to end a career in adventuring. When the room service arrived, Wilfried said he was not to be sated with your average fishy fare, and that his appetite was in a state that only something fit for a king would do. When the attendant heard this, they knew that the right thing was to say, "Right away, sir." And for a customer that would spare no expense, find Robin and Dayton to confer with them on what to do with his barrel of fish that had been suddenly become such a windfall. When Nuffrey conferred with them and paid an exorbitant sum for a princely portion, Robert and Nathan knew they had struck gold with this barrel, and taking a portion for themselves to celebrate but a modest sum, and proclaiming it delightful, but better to sell at a premium, they fell into North trickery straight away. They consigned their royal barrel of flying fish to the depths of their vault to protect their investment just as planned. The final mouse to stroke at North's plan would have an unexpected touch of elegance put to it by three generations of mouse thieves working to make this last great heist go off without a hitch. It seemed obvious now that the barrel was in the vault, that all that needed to be done was for Northreed to request a portion of the fish, nay, the whole barrel, wisely. Tilsom had agreed to spirit himself out of the barrel upon being left in the vault, and did so shortly after being left there. Thankfully, it was not stored in an obvious place, and not so evidently missing when Tilsom put it in the barrel as agreed, along with some choice leaves for himself, including a fine captain's coat, a cutlass without match, and a masterwork of a light crossbow. There appeared to be a mysterious golden color calling to him in his green glow, seemed to resonate with his green eyes. It was in a prominent position in the vault, and he deemed it irresistibly attractive in any case, not large enough to attract attention, missing in such a den of splendors. When the room service came to fetch the barrel, he was still stuck inside with his treasures, wheeling the barrel out to Northreed's room. Tewson felt scot-free as he patiently awaited his signal to emerge. They would have likely had to fight their way out, and he trusted his new friends and his ability to wield his new cutlass ably enough to get back without any debilitating wounds. Any beast looking to restore order in a place like this would want to keep the peace, even if a handful of treasures were to find themselves stowed away. After the attendant had been compensated handsomely in chips for bringing the barrel to Nuffreed's room, the signal was given to Towson to emerge, and emerge he did. Not only was Martin's sword a little fishier for the wear, but still totally washable, but with his own treasures absconded from the vault. In the time waiting in the barrel, temptation had taken hold, and even though the barrel was dark, the eerie green glow of the golden coral enticed Towson enough that he put it on. And so when he did, the ancient boon of his ancestors emerged from within, and his place as a great adventurer was cemented in his destiny. Unlike Samin and the other Vidagas before him, those 1,000 Thingagummies, he would be the one to carry the destiny of his family forward through the ages, though he knew this not. And for other adventurers, his newly found heroic might yearned. In the middle of his first great adventure, though, he knew it not. He found in the vault of the cat's paw, in a barrel of fish, his coronation as the new Prince of Cats. In that moment, Robert and Nathan surmised it wise to take stock of their vault. With such a windfall as the sale of a full barrel of fish, they thought to get some of their choicer treasures out to see what could be done with them. There in the corner, they noticed that the golden collar they thought of as a diadem, it could fit their next knot, had gone missing. The alarm was raised, sending the adventurers into alert, and every beast into a tizzy. Wolf and Notlet had been casing the game room, trying to find ways to distract, disable, and disengage from the situation. On the cat's paw should it become unstable. An alarm being raised was enough to get them ready to fight their way to an escape. All that remained was to reunite with Tewsome and Norfried and back away to the wood ship. During the fray, Spittle and Spook fought on the railing of the ship. Throughout their journey on the cat's paw, they had great fortune, and a vast tray of valuable chips stood between them as they argued. Spook hollered, "You great greedy gibbon," as he tugged on a tray of chips. Truly there was more than enough for both of them, but neither could leave well enough alone. As he tried to twist the chips out of the hands of his partner, Spittle heaved back at him, remonstrating for the lack of compromise, screeching, "You creature of ill repute!" The chattering between the two squirrels was getting so vociferous that when the ship rocked for reasons unbeknownst to all involved, the chips flipped over the railing, leading those surrounding them to proclaim, "You craven ramblers!" in amusement as they both dove over the railing to get the chips they could. That would be a long and muddy walk back to the cat's paw. They could be sure they earned their share, picking it out of the book. Back aboard the cat's paw, it was only evident to Norflit what was the matter with the lurching of the ship, for it was he that went to the engine room to see what could be done. He surmised that overfilling the engine's boiler with coils and other fuels would overload the function of the ship long enough to provide a distraction for them to escape. His timing was impeccable, for few noticed a cat decked out with a sword and an older mouse carrying a scabbard cagily and yet somewhat obviously underneath his duster. Few noticed, but both of you that did knew to be watchful and followed them with eyes and their paws covertly. For no other than Robert and Nathan and Eunice Bramblethorne, their tireless mercenary, were watching them with keen eyes, preparing them catamaran for the pursuit of the thieves in their midst. Despite no duck being nearby, the function of the cat's paw water paddles were waning, and in so doing brought their ship to a sedate meander down the River Moss. This allowed the woodship to catch up with the ailing riverboat as planned. This made the plans of our adventurers that much more obvious, and though hoping to stop them in their tracks and their hasty escape, had their crew prepared their catamaran for launch. With the woodship on the horizon, 3 generations of mouse thieves in Toothsome knew where they needed to go away in great haste. No sooner were they try to get on the deck to dive overboard that they were blocked in their path by Eunice Bramblethorne herself. Taking a detour, our group climbed the scaffolds where the upper patches lay, and they might take the high road one by one and find their way around. Eunice's resistance was their aim. Clambering up the footbridge ladder with the observation scaffolds, they made their way with great haste along the wiry path to where the egglet lay. They had anticipated that Robert and Nathan would be there, so they were glad to send down some of the voles above them from the scaffolding, rolling these voles down the cable bridge, knocking both Birdcage brothers sprawling, cursing to their chagrin. Using the brief moment they had, they made their escape down the cable path, after rolling voles, who was subject to the vole assault, looking stunned and dismayed. They divulged in pose in this circumstance, North quipped as he chuckled, and three mouse thieves chuckled to each other as they made their way on the upper deck. Good fortune smiled upon them. Or when some circumstances after such a fall from up a deck would run the risk of injuring them, they found that they were able to slide down the cat's paddle poles as they slowly rotated, though it may take time. They could find a safe escape from there, and few would think was such a novel location for escapees. Few except Eunice Bramblethorne, of course, the veteran mercenary that was able to bring these thieves to justice, even if it meant doing battle with what appeared to be swift thieves. Offred thought to do his kin proud for once, and volunteered to battle with Eunice, so that Nufflet and Twosome could stay safe. Eunice said haughtily that she had never been bested in battle, and any that could have her hand in marriage, though she was confident that this dullard couldn't best her alone, let alone the gang of four assembled. She brought her blade down and scabbarded across his shoulders. As Nuffred returned the favour, striking mercifully upon her unguarded obliques, he chided. I reckon you be giving your new husband a recuperative massage upon the morrow, once we've been better acquainted with each other. He dashed with a warrior's grace. Some say the grace of Martin's blade, used in such a merciful and pacifist fashion, for love as they aim, gave in the best of the day, and henceforth, as they would regale you with their new home in Bruckhull, old Nuffred always gets his new wife, Eunice, the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that faithful sparring that led them to married life together. Or whether it was a hero's grace or an eagerness for a comely mouse bride, Norfried carried his unconscious new bride with him, for he wasn't going to turn down such a wonderful event, eager to settle after this last great score. All of this was made even sweeter because he could share this last great caper with his dear lost son, grandson he didn't even know he had. This strange cactus looked ever more the leader as he strode purposefully to shore. The woodship was approaching to rescue them home, and the crew at Catspaw were more than busy righting the ship from the wrongs done to it, grateful that the engine had not blown out and had thankfully stabilized. Few aboard either ship saw that the catamaran aboard the Cat's Paw was slowly disengaging from the main ship, ready for a private journey. Aboard the woodship, there were many great joys as the crew were reunited in celebration of the great deeds done. Toothsome was looking fearsome in his power, reunited with the boon of his primordial ancestor, the golden collar of Cavildo. The captain's jacket and the peer's scimitar didn't hurt, though he kept his light crossbow hidden, as it was thankfully low profile enough to be concealed. Nuff was so happy things had gone well as they did that he could not contain himself from singing, and Nuff played on his father's flute merrily to him in the tune of a jaunty jig. The shrews, led there by their chieftain Juggalo, pounded out a percussive element with their hearty foot paws, keeping the rhythm. The woodship set sail, the victuals in a pail, our squittles we will hail. Imagine, imagine a baby's fingernail. Imagine, imagine, please don't shout and wail. Buniculi, bunicula, buniculi, bunicula. It's midnight, you're hollering like a harridan. Just as you'd expect, the cat's paw doesn't have a sail. Imagine, imagine a baby's fingernail. Imagine, imagine, please don't shout and wail. Buniculi, bunicula, buniculi, bunicula. It's midnight, it's midnight. She's hollering like a harridan. North continued drawing a new song to a conclusive end. We've righted the wrongs of gambling vermin. On that's cat's paw, a den of beasts of ill repute, the trick to avoid the trouble, or a quibble, or a quarrel, was putting lock, stock, and twosome in a barrel. The good ship Woodship sailed back to its cove in England that was its home, Woodship Creek, and the crew of shrews maintained it wonderfully in its berth. From there it was not long of a walk to Red Bull Abbey, where they were long excited about restoring the sword to Martin, drawing their adventure to a close. However, not all were so inclined to draw the adventure to a close so suddenly. The catamaran followed them from a distance so covert that none were the wiser until they reached quite close to the abbey. Then the passengers disembarked. As 3 generations of mouse thieves entered the abbey, along with twosome and Logolog's crew shrews, all looking to celebrate. Many were delighted to see them arrive and to prepare another feast, though a more modest one this time, but no less enthusiastic to commemorate their great fortune and victory. When Nuff and Nufflet and their charming but mysterious new grandpa Nuffreed showed up with their tale of how they tricked the sword out of the vault, along with another couple choice relics, he and Gingerbeer had misgivings regarding the merits and the methods of the manner won back. But when Gingerbeer saw the color on Twosome and how his appearance had changed, he was grave, yet inspired, for he saw how Tavuto's boon had changed him. He had heard tales of his ancient family's relics, forever ago lost before their first ancestor came here, in search of renewal, without his color, held prized above all of all the fathers of his fathers, though thought unobtainable for seasons without count, recovered and renewed to his family. Gingerbeer felt a twinge of pride, with twice as much foreboding. Robert and Nathan arrived at the Abbey, oddly civil after all they'd been through. They came through a thoughtful and justifiable entreaty. They greeted the Abbess, Bella, and Martin in turn, with humble reverence, though shooting daggers in a sadly catty manner to the 3 mouse thieves, who looked a bit bashful given the circumstances. When regaling the witnesses with their tale from their perspective, it became hard not to sympathize with them. And though they all had sincere apologies to offer, it was Martin that first responded with conciliatory offer that these 2 reasonable businessmen, though although my sword unfairly stolen by 2 ruffians was justifiably traded in good faith, there could be little justification for this purloining of Twosome color, other than it was his natural birthright, as we now know. We of Redwall Abbey seek to do better than those who did us wrong. This is why we'll be glad to open our doors for you in a time of aid going forward. And for a dozen seasons forward, we will be glad to offer a nominal portion of our ales and cordials to you, as thanks for your understanding in such unusual circumstances. Robin and Nation Birdcage, ever the pragmatists, outgunned and behind schedule, agreed gladly. They all celebrated over the very same ale and cordials they had agreed to share, and all involved had to admit it was the sweetest they had, and sweeter for the sharing. When Spook and Spittle got back to the cat's paw, they were not keen on travelling, much less on gambling. They spent their remaining chips on time sailing on the riverboat, enough that they decided to work there, and gladly joined the crew of the Grand Steamboat. From the other side of things, they saw even more clearly the futility of coming to a riverboat casino to seek one's fortune. But they had to admit to each other that they were both very fortunate indeed to have found a new home on the cat's paw. Of Twosome's journeys and adventures, it is said that with the golden collar of his old Ramondi birthright, he was nigh invincible, and he put the seas to practice in his time. Even the venerable Lonolog had to recognize him as the captain of the woodship in time, and with 3 miraculous victories only Twosome could have wrenched from the jaws of certain defeat. Thence he and the inspired crew of the woodship travelled long across the globe, righting wrongs and liberating where he found injustice. Occasionally he would return to old Brockhall, where Nuffreed and Eunice had taken up for retirement. There the old gang would meet, and they and Martin, Denny and Nufflet would go to the Abbey. Gingerbeer and Sandingomm would return when summoned by a sparrow to reunion with their son, and it was always a memorable and delightful occasion, worthy and fond remembrance. And that concludes the tale of Song of Sandingomm, written by Timothy Vavra, directed by Timothy Vavra, theatrically enunciated by Timothy Vavra. And if you like this tale, share, tell your friends, most importantly, tell everyone you know that would like it. Like and subscribe. And I hope you tune us for more. Tune in for more from our channel. and more from me, and more from my wife. And hopefully you'll have wonderful seasons all the day long. Hopefully you have a happy evening. Yes, indeed.